sometimes leave out water in our conversations around food production and food justice and food security. The best soil in the world means nothing if there's no access to water, or if you're flooded, or if your farm is flooded.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Yemi Amu is the founder and director of Oko Farms, a beloved community-based aquaponics farm cultivating fish alongside produce in New York City. After a decade of growing food in several locations across Brooklyn, including 3 years in Williamsburg, Oko Farms unexpectedly had their lease terminated this November. They're forced to pack up the farm and find a new location, and today on the show, Yemi is sharing more about her search and the power of aquaponics. Yemi Amu, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's so fun to have you up in our studio, and it seems like you maybe have had a busy day today. What have you been up to?
Wow, I was up in Harlem, not that far up for you guys, but far up from me, coming from Brooklyn, to check out a potential new farm space.
And what are you looking for right now, looking for the farm space? Like, what would your dream farm space be?
Our dream farm space would be an outdoor site, of course, about 20,000 square feet, no less than that. An acre would be so sweet. It would be in a great community. And by great community, just being around people who are excited to engage in urban ag. It would be accessible to trains so that people can come and visit. We love people to visit. So being in an area where people can easily get there is also very nice. And the space would be open. There'd be water access, electricity, because we need that. And yeah, no tall buildings blocking light. We want plenty of sunlight.
That's, I feel like, quite a big wish list for New York City, but I'm manifesting it for you.
Thank you.
How did it go today? It was maybe of interest?
It was actually very cool. It was nice to just imagine being in Harlem. And the space was really nice, beautiful sun. It was a rooftop space, so lots of sunlight, beautiful sunlight. There was a school across the street, things like that get me excited because that's people you can engage with more directly. Yeah, it was just being on the roof, getting sunlight on my face, imagining being up there, and just the possibilities of bringing urban farming and aquaponics to Harlem was actually quite exciting.
Yeah, I feel like that is a really cool idea to have, especially for what Oko Farms has been doing. And I want to kind of dig into just the idea behind Oko and everything. But to start, I'm wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about what kind of food memories you have from growing up, like how you feel like your perspective on food was shaped.
Wow, I have a lot of great food memories. There's a lot of terrible ones, but a lot of great ones. I was telling someone the other day that the high school I went to, okay, so growing up in Nigeria, I'm going to start over, our meals were always very structured. You knew every household, and I think it still works that way. I haven't lived there in a while, but every household has what we call a timetable, which is basically a schedule for meals every day. So there is never a surprise, what you're having for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it was the same at school. And because we had all our meals, school meals prepared from scratch. And Fridays were the big days because Fridays we got to eat jollof rice and turkey. So throughout the week, we would negotiate for extra turkey or extra rice. So if I do your homework, you give me your piece of turkey. So Friday afternoons in the dining hall was always something interesting because you see people going from table to table collecting their pieces of turkey and extra rice because it's remember that favor I did you on Tuesday? I'm here for my turkey. So that.
What side of the trade were you on? Were you getting extra servings or were you kind of giving your food out to people?
I was definitely getting the extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could tell by your laugh you were collecting.
Definitely would have 4 pieces or 5 of chicken. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was mostly, I can say it now because I'm grown, but letting people copy my homework.
What subject?
All of them.
All of it. Star pupil, all the turkey. I want to ask you more about this timetable because I haven't heard about this before. So who would fill it out at home, and it would be for the whole week at once?
It would be for the whole week, yeah. In my household, it was always my mom.
Yeah.
So, breakfast, you're having this, lunch, this, dinner, this. And it was always, it was just so that it made feeding children a lot quicker and seamless.
Yeah, and also maybe useful for her that she was planning out the meals when she was shopping for the week.
Exactly.
And the kids aren't going to complain because they know that they're going to eat this for lunch that day.
And if you don't like it, too bad.
That's what's on the table.
That's what's on the table, yeah.
So where did your interest in like urban farming and farming in general come from?
I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, of course, very urban environment. But I think I had a really special upbringing. My mom loves plants. And we always had plants at home. We had almond trees. We played in the almond trees. I was always surrounded by green, and I never thought about it. The high school I went to, both middle school, high school, same place. We had a school garden, or each kid had, for about 2 years, their own little plots where they grew food. We had chickens on the farm. We had rabbits at one point. So I've just always been immersed in nature for a city kid. And in a very unconscious way, I just thought it was normal. And then when I moved to New York at 17, I just really missed it and didn't realize how much it had impacted me. I was in the household where my mom was always making us drink weird things. I called it weird things at the time, but now I'm like, oh no, she just soaked ginger and made us drink it when we had an upset stomach. Or, she was always doing what I call kitchen medicine. There was always an herb or something. If you're constipated, she'd make you eat lots of pineapple or papaya. We had fruits for snack all the time. It was just, having access to fresh food all the time was really normal for me. And I didn't realize how much I loved it until I moved to New York, and it wasn't always accessible to me.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really common thing for people, that the absence is what makes people notice it in some way. But I want to talk about aquaponics because I feel like that's what makes Oko more of a unique urban farm. And I don't really know a lot about it. So could you give a little aquaponics 101? What is that, and why is that the system that you really want to kind of prioritize and highlight at Oko Farms?
Aquaponics is essentially farming in water. You're farming both freshwater fish and vegetables together in this closed loop ecosystem. And that's just a fancier saying you're raising both fish and plants in the same water. The waste that the fish produce is recycled by giving it to plants, and then the plants take up that fish waste as nutrients, and then clean water is returned to the fish. So you're able to raise both fish and plants while conserving water at the same time. It's pretty beautiful. And it is, it's biomimicry. It's what happens naturally in any body of water where there's fish or aquatic animals. There's going to be waste, and nature has a way of recycling that waste. We just get to do it on land and use it as a way to grow both ornamental and edible fish and plants.
Yeah, so what kinds of vegetables and fish has Oko been producing over the past couple years?
Ooh, so many. On the fish end, over the years, we've done catfish, we've done carp, we've done bluegill, we've done freshwater prawns. And for a little while, we actually did tilapia. The fish we love the most are the carp. One, because there's the ornamental carp, which are the goldfish and koi, and we love them. They're just so fun to have on the farm. They're almost like puppies. They recognize you. They love engaging with people. And then the edible carp are not as popular, but they're really great sustainable fish to raise because they're considered invasive. So raising fish like that is awesome. They're also omnivorous, so we can feed them some of what we grow on the farm, which is really nice. And they taste delicious.
Wait, I'm still hung up on what you said about the ornamental carp recognizing you. What does that mean? When you walk up to the tank, they come and say hi?
They swim up to you. They would sometimes splash you, which happens quite a bit. Sometimes I walk in and I'm chatting, I'm doing everything, and then I suddenly get this huge splash of water on me. And that's their way of trying to get my attention.
Because you feed them and they think you have food?
You feed them and you engage with them.
Yeah.
Like even we have some NYU students that work with us on the farm, and they don't necessarily feed the fish, but the fish still engage with them because they're used to them. They see them all the time. So they recognize faces. They even recognize like the sound of voices. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I thought it was because I fed them until some of the students pointed out one day, no, there's certain things they only do with you that they don't do with the rest of us. And there's so many different people on the farm who feed them.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like a lot of people, especially people who eat fish, maybe dismiss fish as like basically not being sentient or like not being an animal in the same kind of way. Do you feel like you have a different insight into that, just being able to watch these different kinds of fish and how they interact differently?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They are, I mean, every living thing has its own intelligence. Don't let me get started.
Get started.
Human beings have this weird hierarchy, like even plants have intelligence and respond to the environment. But yeah, fish are absolutely sentient beings. They feel fear. They feel excitement. They display both fear and excitement. They recognize you. They love to have fun. The koi especially, they love having their backs rubbed. They love being amongst each other. You can see a big difference in their behavior when there's a group of them and they feel safe in a group versus when they're isolated and alone. You can see like clear behavioral changes. They let you know when they're full. They let you know when they'd rather play than eat. Like they're living things, and all living things are incredibly intelligent. It's just sometimes as humans, we don't recognize the intelligence. So we dismiss it.
And on the vegetable side, like what kinds of crops have you been cultivating at Oko?
Ooh, so some of my childhood favorites, like okra, lemongrass, different types of amaranth greens, and then chilies, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, beans, taro, which we call cocoyam in Nigeria, just like a wide lettuce, beets, radishes, just wide variety of vegetables. I love to explore. And I love to challenge people's expectations about what is possible to grow in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
We grow grains, for instance. We grow sorghum. We've grown rice in the past. This year we grew sugarcane and pressed syrup. So we actually like to grow and press the canes. Incredible. So I like to just challenge people's ideas of what's possible in urban farming, but also what's possible for aquaponics. Because a lot of people cannot conceptualize growing in water and think it's not possible to grow in water. You can't grow without soil. And water is essential to life. There is no living thing that can grow or thrive without water. So including plants. Plants can grow really well in water as long as there's nutrients available for them.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture it right now. So are they planted in anything, or it's just that they're in the water and then the fish poop is what's kind of being their fertilizer?
Yeah, so the way it looks varies depending on who you are and what materials you have accessible to you. So you could have the plant sitting in a growing medium. For some people, it's lava rock, just helping to give the plant structure, right? Because it's the roots you want in water. The rest of the plant should be above water.
Yeah.
Plants take up water through their roots. And also use it to build their skeletal system. That's why plants droop when they don't have water. So as long as you're able to hold the plant up and give it structure and the roots are in water, that's what matters. So sometimes it's just the plant roots are just floating in water freely and you have a board or something that's holding it up. Sometimes you have some sort of medium that is mimicking soil that's holding the plant up. And then you have water moving from the fish to the plants and then back to the fish.
I'm picturing like when I've propagated a houseplant before and I've sprouted it in water. Once it's reached the point that it has roots, I've planted it in soil. But for some houseplants, at least, you're saying that I could have just kept it in the water if it had proper nutrients and things like that?
If it had nutrients and oxygen. So if it's in a jar, that water is stagnant. Those roots are not getting oxygen. So you do need to be circulating that water.
Right.
To make sure that you're incorporating oxygen into the water for the plant roots.
Okay, I feel like I'm learning so much about aquaponics right now. And clearly you're a great teacher. How much does like education about aquaponics fit into the mission of Oko Farms?
I think everything we do is educating people about aquaponics. Even things like growing taro or growing sugarcane is just educating people about how plants grow, about, how aquaponics works and what you could do with aquaponics. Um, Letting people, engaging people in conversations around water and water use in farming and how you cannot farm without water. And there's so many people in the world that are actually starving because of drought right now, or even because of floods, right? Climate change has taken over our reality. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're dealing with the impact of climate change. And one of the things that is most vulnerable is our food system and our ability to feed ourselves. And I like to talk about aquaponics in this sense. Like, we sometimes leave out water in our conversations around food production and food justice and food security. The best soil in the world means nothing if there's no access to water, or if you're flooded, or if your farm is flooded. And aquaponics grew out of the desire for people thousands of years ago, or the need to feed themselves, whether because they were facing droughts or because they were facing floods.
Yeah, I think that's a really important lesson. And certainly in this moment in time, we're seeing drought and flood happening in different parts of the world at the same time.
Hmm.
I think it's very just intense to think about how that can affect the food system in the future. And do you think that aquaponics is like a underutilized form of farming that we should be doing more of because of that?
Absolutely. Because it is adaptable. Our farm has always been outdoors because we love the outdoors, and we believe that, that urban farms should help improve the natural environment. But for those who don't have outdoor space and need to feed themselves and grow food for themselves, aquaponics can be indoors. It's adaptable. It can happen on a small scale. It can happen on a large scale. It can be in your basement or on your roof or in your classroom. Um, so I really believe it does have a role to play. And, for people who are thinking about food security, you can also raise livestock, and do it in a way that is ecological and sustainable and not extractive. I think that's the big piece. It's like, it's not extractive. You're utilizing waste to grow food.
Yeah, I really like that. And in terms of the crops and the fish and all of the kind of bounty that Oko has been producing, like how does that get distributed to people? How are people able to eat it or try it or buy it?
Hmm. In a lot of different ways, we distribute food. So we have a farmers market, we have culinary programs, and just like farm to table opportunities. And also, we donate the produce. The fish in particular, we usually invite people to come on the farm to eat the fish with us. So we work with chefs and we process the fish, we harvest and process, and we have meals on the farm. Or we harvest the fish, make a meal out of it, distribute. So we put them in community fridges.
And then also you have the kind of apothecary line as well, right?
Yes. One of the things I love about aquaponics is that you're actually taking what most people consider waste and throw out,
Mm.
and you're recycling it to grow food. We've also taken that approach to our farm. So anything that doesn't look too great to sell, that is still, delicious, but doesn't look great for selling, or isn't great to even give people, because just because we're donating it doesn't mean it shouldn't look beautiful. We take those plants and we convert them into um, teas and, dried seasonings and, culinary oils and body products. And that way we're really minimizing waste that's grown on the farm. There's parts of the plants also that people don't realize that they can eat, like
Hmm.
carrot tops. We'll make carrot top pesto or like a salad dressing with the carrot tops. So,
Yeah, I really like agonize over when I buy carrots and I don't. Sometimes the carrot tops are not that great, or I like don't have time to make the pesto, and so I compost it. But
mhm,
I know that like it's such a thing to do, and then it makes me feel like I'm missing out on like all of the things that my carrots can give me.
mhm.
So I like that you guys are able to kind of close that loop in terms of the process as well.
Absolutely. And it's fun and it's educational, right? That's part of it too. Just by offering carrot top pesto, you are educating people. You're letting people know that, hey, you could do something with a carrot top. We also work with youth, and they love they love the apothecary. They love to make something new and interesting all the time with the farm products.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a expansive thing to just think about the ways that things that we typically eat can be used in other applications.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about just how you need to be versatile and expansive when you're doing urban farming. And I feel like this is obviously a really important moment for that because Oko Farms just had to move,
Yes.
which I'm sorry that you guys had to do that. And I'm wondering if you
Yeah.
could just talk a little bit about like why you had to move the farm and also like what that means to actually like pack up and break down a farm because it seems like obviously there's a ton of work that goes into that.
Yeah. There's an incredible amount of work that goes into breaking down the farm, but actually not as much work as it takes as building it. It's just a different process because it's a lot harder. When you're building a farm, you're building with excitement, and there's a certain like optimism and hope for the future that goes into building a farm, where taking down a farm is like the total opposite of that.
It's so rough.
It's devastating.
So what happened, I guess?
So what happened was we got an opportunity to be on this big, beautiful land in Williamsburg. And we knew that it was temporary. We knew that it was temporary and at some point was going to be turned into some sort of development. However, we did not realize like somewhere in the middle of the farming season, we would be told that, it was time, basically. Time
How
to
many
move
years
on.
were you there before?
We were there for 4 years.
Yeah.
And, the reality is it's hard to come across farmland in New York City. It's really difficult. For farms in general and urban farms in particular, access to land is very difficult. And we did take advantage of this opportunity. We knew it would be temporary. We were just taken aback by how swift it was. I think that's the thing. It's like, okay, we're doing this work. We believe it's appreciated. There's community support around it. We believe that the people who invited us because they believe in the work that we do. The swiftness in which it all happened was a little bit jarring, but we have been looking for a new site for a while, and making plans for what the new site would be and how it would work. But it's also hard to do both things. It's hard to be like running a fully operational farm that also acts as an outdoor classroom and doing all this stuff and also be actively looking for a new space. Those two things are difficult. And, we made the decision to use that space to show people what is possible with aquaponics and what is possible with urban farming. And we have no regrets at all about, doing that. It's just that it is important though, as we face climate change, which is getting worse and worse. New York is facing historic drought.
We've had fires happening all the time throughout the past couple of weeks.
Yeah. So, it just speaks to the necessity of this type of work, and how there needs to be space made for more of this type of work in the city. And it's not something that's a cute niche thing. It should be something urban farming should be part of the fabric of our city. We need it. We need it because 1 in 4 New Yorkers are food insecure. We need it because the climate is falling apart around us every day. And urban residents are the most vulnerable when the food system is negatively impacted. We saw that during COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the type of land that you had access to in Williamsburg, you were not on a rooftop, you were on the water, like on the ground. And that real estate is, especially along the Williamsburg waterfront, it's being developed a ton right now. There's a ton of like money and investment in that. And I imagine that it's just kind of harder to convince, Oko Farms has so much value, but it's not like a multi-million-dollar hotel that
Right.
I don't know what they're going to use that space for, but that's what's been happening in that area.
Yeah, I think there's this unfortunate competition between housing or whatever developments that's going up and green space. in not just New York City, but in a lot of cities around the world.
But we're seeing it here with like the Elizabeth Street Garden, for example.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because we should not have to pit housing against like environmental conservation, because both things are equally important. New York City, we need to be able to breathe. We like, that is so important. We deserve beautiful green spaces. What's the point of packing people in environments where there's no space for environmental engagement? There are no green spaces. There isn't access to food. Housing and access to food are equally important, you know? So I think it's unfortunate because we don't want people to think that there's only one or the other that's possible. We have to be able to reimagine a world where both things are possible.
Definitely. And I think also in terms of, I think the heat dome is what it's called, but parts of the city that have less green space and less trees are markedly hotter in the summer because they don't have that, like, the plants helping keeping everything cool.
Absolutely. And we have astronomical asthma rates in children because there are not enough green spaces. So it's asthma rates, it's type 2 diabetes, it's heart diseases, all of these things that I think are made worse because we live in a city where there's, you know, barely any green spaces, especially green spaces that also provide access to healthy, fresh produce.
So I want to understand more, like, what it meant to break down the farm in the middle of the growing season. Like, where did the fish go? Sorry, is that a...
The fish are safe.
Okay. That's like what my mom told me when my goldfish died as a kid.
Oh, they are so safe. I'm not going to reveal where they are, but we've placed them in a pretty safe and secure space. And I just have to shout out NYU Water Lab. Those students were amazing in helping us transfer about 800 to 1,000 fish
That's
safely.
So many more fish than I thought.
With like 0 fatalities. It is incredibly difficult to do that. And they supported us with it, and I'm so thankful to them for just their commitment to fish welfare and to supporting us to make sure that our fish continue to be like healthy and safe and cared for.
Yeah, and I think in general, it seems like there's just been a real community effort to come and help at the farm, and that must feel at least one gratifying point in an unfortunate thing that has to happen.
Oh, absolutely. I remember when we first built the farm and built our first farm in Bushwick, and we had people come from everywhere. It's just amazing. I couldn't believe there were this many different people who were interested in like helping to build a farm. And then in 2021, when we moved to the Williamsburg site, people came from LA, people came from like New Jersey, people came from like so many different parts of the city and even outside of the city to help build a farm. This is what I mean. Like putting a farm together is just, it exemplifies hope and like optimism and community and just belief in a better world. Honestly, I can't think of anything that exemplifies it because it takes a lot of faith to think that you can put something in the ground and it's going to feed you in like X amount of months, you know, or whatever. And people coming together for that is always a beautiful thing. And taking down the farm, even though it was sad to do it, it was also really hopeful to see so many people who are like, hey, we're here for you.
Yeah, I like that. And I think on the hope and optimism train, thinking about the future of Oko Farms and how you can get there, like what kinds of, if people are listening to this and they want to help and they don't necessarily have a 20,000 square foot piece of land in New York, like what kind of help are you looking for in this moment?
Honestly, the beautiful thing is that people have been coming to us about everything, whether it's 20,000, whether it's 2,000.
They're like, I have a basement if you want
whether
it.
It's like 400 square feet. And we're happy for all of it, honestly, because it's just helping people like visualize like green spaces in different areas. So I just want to encourage people, you know, anyone you know who has space, you know, it doesn't have to be up to 20,000 square feet. It could be smaller. Reach out to us and let us know. As long as it's available, there's electricity, there's water, it's accessible. I think those are the things that we're looking at. We've looked at some rooftop spaces, which is also great. You know, we've looked at we've talked to someone's invited us to schools. There's been a lot of, it's honestly helping to also like stretch our imagination of what the new space can be, or maybe it's new spaces, right? Instead of one space, maybe it's like several spaces that collectively add up to like 20,000 square feet. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4. We're also open to that at this point. It just means more aquaponics in more communities.
A decentralized farm.
Yeah.
And what timeline also?
Really, that's the vision for New York, is to have farms everywhere.
Every rooftop.
Yes, like everywhere that there's space to put a farm, why can't we? That's the dream. And the timeline is, we would love to get started next year in March. Yeah, April latest is to like get the farm going so we can continue to grow food and do all of the programming that we love to do and people love us for.
Well, I'm manifesting that alongside you and everybody else. And while we're talking and you have your kind of soapbox moment, I'm curious if there's anything about urban farming or aquaponics that you wish just more people could know and understand.
That's a good question. It depends on the day.
Yeah, on this day.
On this day, I want to say that because New Yorkers are, or just people who live in cities, are so disconnected from nature, we don't understand how intrinsic urban farming is to our survival. And I say that because we survived COVID and we saw how devastating it was for New York City in particular. A lot of our high death rates were just because there were so many of us living with like food-related illnesses. And so many New Yorkers are vulnerable and don't have access to food security. And urban farming gives us an opportunity not only to address climate change, but also to feed people. And, food is a fundamental human right, to create beautiful spaces that are productive and feed people. It's just so important to our survival. And I don't think we understand it. And we shouldn't have to leave the city to engage in nature. We should be able to engage in nature right where we live. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's the thing is we talk about housing a lot, which is so important, but it should be housing and.
It should be housing and also we have so much housing in New York that landlords are sitting on and not renting to people. And that's, I think, a huge thing that isn't often addressed when we're talking about developing land is like using the housing we already have, using the space we already have.
And it's also not affordable. The rent is too damn high.
Yeah. The rent is too damn high and there's not enough aquaponics in New York City.
Yeah, like urban farming is essential to the future of the world. Most of the world is going to be living in cities very soon. How are we feeding ourselves? That's a question we should always be answering. How are we feeding ourselves? Where's our food coming from? Who's responsible for growing our food? How is it being grown? It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. These are very important questions. And urban farming helps to answer all of it.
I agree. And I think also, like, even if urban farming can't produce at the same scale as some of the places that we're getting our food from, just having the knowledge of understanding, like, this is what a piece of sugarcane looks like when it's growing. Like, this is the process of how things can work together is really a powerful tool to just understand the world in general.
Yes. To understand how your food is grown and how it gets to you and the impact of that food on the environment. Yeah, that's a very powerful tool because then we can push for policy and push for things to like help improve it. And yes, we cannot grow at scale, but I do think collectively many different farms collectively can do a lot. And we've yet to see that. And it would be interesting to see what it would look like.
Yeah, to understand the full potential.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you talking it through with me a bit today. And before we close, I want to play a rapid fire game with you. So I'll give you a question. You can just tell me the first answer that comes into your head.
Let's go.
Okay. Your favorite thing to cultivate at Oko Farms?
Ooh, okay. So it changes from year to year. But this year it was the taro because I love it. You get the root that's edible. You get leaves that are edible. And it just keeps sprouting. It's like a forever food. You plant it once, and then it just continues to produce all of these offshoots. In the back of my head, I have like an apocalypse, like preparation kit?
Oh, of
Like,
course you
what do
do.
you grow in the apocalypse? And taro is on that list.
Okay, when the apocalypse happens, I'm coming to you also because I feel like this is how we're going to survive is the aquaponics. And I love taro, so that's the perfect place to start. Your favorite cookbook right now?
My current favorite cookbook is My Everyday Lagos, written by Yewande Komolafe. It's a beautiful homage to Nigerian food and West African culture in general. I love it.
Your favorite restaurant in New York right now?
Oh,
Big question.
I'm going to say this because the staff makes fun of me about it all the time. But there is this Thai restaurant on Bedford that's called Williamsburg Thai. And that is the place I go to on days that I'm so tired from all of that farm work. And their food is just like delicious and I love it. And it just always makes me feel good to go there and eat their food after a hard day.
Your go-to bagel order?
Ooh, turkey, egg, and cheese on a bagel.
I'm getting a flashback to your childhood of getting all the extra turkey.
It's so funny because I don't even like turkey that much, but it was just the point.
Yeah. Your go-to late night bodega snack?
Ooh, I love plantain chips. Sweet plantain chips.
Do you have a preferred brand or just whatever sweet ones you see?
Whatever sweet ones I see, yeah.
A like kitchen hack or like piece of wisdom like for cooking that you think more people should know about?
Just very basic thing. When you're using a cutting board, just have a wet napkin underneath it so it doesn't slide. I think I'm always correcting people when I see their chopping board like sliding. Yeah, and just good knife skills.
Yeah, that one is a good knife skill, I guess, also by extension. Most underrated piece of kitchen equipment?
Honestly, the knife. I'm sorry. You can do so much with a kitchen knife. Is it underrated though?
I mean, it is the most basic one, but maybe people aren't hyping it up enough, you know? So I think we could say it's underrated.
Yeah. Even sometimes, like, even instead of using a blender, I'll just start chopping because it's so meditative.
And there's less to clean.
And there's less to clean, yeah. Yeah. I just like chopping. Like, sometimes, like, mincing and slicing is so meditative.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Okay, finally, a fictional food scene, like from a movie or TV show that you wish you could magically eat in real life.
Fictional. Okay, this is not fictional, I'm sorry, but I'm obsessed with the Great British Baking Show. And I just really want to taste it.
Everything.
I just really wish I could, because first of all, I don't know half of what those things are. And I just want to taste them, especially when I'm here, like, it's like matcha and curry or some like random ingredient I've never heard of. I really want to taste, and I want to argue with Paul Hollywood and be like, you don't know good bakes. I do. This is delicious.
I would love for you to be a guest judge on the Great British Bake Off, if only to watch you take Paul Hollywood down a peg. Well, I love that. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me. And I hope we can do another episode in the future when Oko Farms has a new home.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me and for just highlighting Oko Farms. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Joshua David Stein, welcome back to This Is Taste. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I couldn't be better, Matt.
We're not going to talk about the parking tickets.
No.
Let's move past that. We'll get to the Esquire list, which is terrific. Congratulations on releasing that this week. But first off, where are you going in New York right now, restaurant-wise? I know you just did this massive project, but I'd love to ask New Yorkers, where are you going right now?
Well, the truth is that my daily eating habits are wildly mixed depending on whether I have my kids or not. The places I'm eating, I mean, there's a lot of New York places on the list, and it's no joke. I love them. Like Knox and Demo are go-tos for me. Two places that opened after the list closed, which I think are wonderful, are Kiko and Accru.
Oh, yeah, Accru, sure.
Accru is a Australian tasting menu for $95 in the West Village, and it's like mind-blowingly good. And Kiko is the sweetest, most delicious, vibiest room, I guess just north of Tribeca. But a place that I go to all the time is Lore in Park Slope, where I live.
Yeah.
I live adjacent to Park Slope, and it's kind of modern Indian cuisine, and it's one of those restaurants. I was just thinking about it on the way here. It's one of those restaurants that's never going to get on a BNR list. It's not going to be on any lists. It's just not that kind of place, I guess. But the food is so spectacular. So I go there quite often.
Why can't it be on the list? You're making the list. I ask this with all respect because I know what you're saying, but I'd love to get your mindset when you say it can't be on a list.
Well, it's too old for our list.
Agree. So
Yeah.
Sure, right. That's true. It's already been open a few years.
Yeah, it's been open for 3 or 4 years or something like that.
So it's past its new phase, but there are lists that, capture the zeitgeist that aren't all about new restaurants.
I mean, to get real, to be a standard restaurant and get on the list like that, you need PR.
Yeah.
PR is really expensive. The restaurant world's really hard. Margins are really small. And the question is, do you have the extra $5,000 a month to maybe get a mention?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, and the second part of that is, it does the mention actually put butts in the seat.
Yeah.
You'd hope, like Esquire, we're looking at your building right now in our office. It's a big publication and has wide reach, but still there's a lot of noise out there about restaurants. Like the recommendation engines come from multiple places now, and does a magazine article actually drive butts in the seats?
Yeah, I mean, I love our package, and I love it exists online, and I do think that we are one of, I'll just say it, I think we're one of the most prestigious lists that exist out there.
Absolutely.
I think there's a whole range of ways to recommend restaurants to move the needle. We are one for sure, but there's others. Thankfully, I'm not in the business of PR, so I don't have to think about it that much, but knowing how hard the business is, the windows are narrow and small.
Yeah, to get on these new lists, especially with new is in the title. And on our show, we try with 3 things at the end of our show. We try to highlight restaurants that aren't brand new. We try to do our part.
I've always wanted to do a best 5-year-old restaurant.
Yeah.
Talking to, I'm sure you're the same. You talk to chefs and restaurateurs, critics, writers, whatever. Sometimes a restaurant hits its stride in year 3 or year 4. And right now, I don't think there's any list that focuses on that, which is a little bit of a bummer.
I would say the only list that really does that is the New York Times 100 that they put out once a year now.
Yeah.
That's the one, to me, is the most comprehensive and without a timestamp required.
Yeah, this is probably a separate conversation, but I think I would want a timestamp. I think you need to slice it. That's why I think BNR works really well.
Yeah.
It needs to be, for me, apples to apples. So you have best new restaurant is apples to apples.
Yep.
You have best 5-year-old restaurant, or something in the 5 to 10-year range. That also seems apples to apples to me. When you start getting into best restaurants, I think what you gain in scope, sometimes you lose a little bit in usability in a way. It's really broad.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's talk about Esquire. Your package, which debuted this week, is comprehensive. I agree. It's really terrific because you did the work. You and your fellow writers on the package, I'd like for you to name them by name, who contributed to this list. Now, let me ask you first off: is how do you, as a team at Esquire, think about the word best? How do you actually go into these visits and say this is actually qualifies for a best?
Yeah. Well, let me first shout out the team, which is Jeff Gordnier, Omar Manoon, Amethyst Ganaway, who's joining us for the first time this year, and me, Joshua David Stein.
I love that group, and I don't know Omar, but Amethyst has been a contributor on Taste for a number of stories, and of course Jeff, the legend in the game, just terrific, and yourself, of course, legend in the game too. So when the 4 of you get together with your team at Esquire, and you're in that room or you're on that Zoom talking about your visits, what are you talking about?
Obviously, best is very subjective, and there's 4 of us. And we have different life experiences, different conditioning, different tastes, different proclivities, different areas of expertise. So it's really important for us to be sort of integrated and think as one unit, you know? If I had to crystallize what we're looking for, it's not just one thing. It's like a variety of metrics, like a sound engineer's soundboard, meaning like, okay, you have originality, you have execution, you have geographic diversity, you have culinary diversity, you have all of these different metrics, and the magic, or it's not really magic. You know what it's like?
The sauce.
The sauce. It's like a master de cave, like a champagne mixer. It's like how we mix those things is what gives the Esquire list its suchness, to use a
it's wonderful that you say it that way, because I totally agree reading through the list, because you're not weighting geography, because you could say New York is the most competitive town, so you should have the most restaurants from New York, but you don't do that. You go to Cincinnati, which is amazing to see a Cincinnati restaurant on this list.
Yeah.
So when you're in that room, are you guys like just debating it and like really trying to cut down the list? Because there isn't a number on it. I haven't even counted it.
No, I think last year we had 50, which was a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And I think now it's around 30, maybe a little bit more. Jeff was the lead this year, and I think Jeff had the final say in what got ranked where. And that is how it is.
No, we don't. We can cut that out.
No, you can keep that in.
Yeah. I mean, you got to have a boss. You got to have like somebody who makes the decision. Of course.
Of
in
course.
the editorial, you can't just have. It's not groupthink. I mean, editing a magazine. You've edited magazines. You've been at top of the masthead.
Jeff's been doing this for a really long time. But I think that each one of us probably has our own internal mix of how you value things such as originality, story, execution, vibe. So what I look for personally in a restaurant is I want the chef to be bringing something personal from their own soul. And I don't mean, by the way, that I am like a stickler for biologic or biographical essentialism. Like, you can cook outside of your culture. Like Bastia in Philadelphia is like a really good example. Tyler Aiken is not Corsican. And yet I hate this phrase, but like he's done the work. And he knows, and what he's cooking combines skill and this palette of flavors and techniques. And I want to look at a menu and be excited. I eat out a lot, and I see a lot of restaurants, and there's always this game that chefs are playing where sometimes the menu is quite straightforward and not that challenging. And then when you get the food, you're like, oh, shit, shoot. Can we curse?
Yeah.
Fuck. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, I think you're saying like understated, right? It over-delivers.
Well, I think the balance that happens is a restaurateur and a chef needs people to order things.
Yeah.
Right? If it's too abstract or avant-garde, it might freak people out. So yeah, they might just call it a skirt steak with a au poivre sauce. And maybe you get it and it's something not totally different, but it's like a real riff on that.
Yeah.
So stipulated. But I still think that when I look at a menu, I want to be jazzed. Like, I want to be excited. I'm still super, super excited about going out to eat. Like, I love it. Mm-hmm. I never understood and still don't understand people in our position who are jaded or over it. It's like, if you're over it, get out of the game.
Yeah, you know what your shelf life is done when you start complaining about a press invite to a dinner. I mean, I hate that shit.
We are the luckiest people in the world.
Lucky. Thank you for saying that. We very much are. We really appreciate it. And let me ask you about market fit. I think that there's probably some level of acknowledgement in your list for a restaurant to meet their market where they're at, because like a diner in Cincinnati or diner in Phoenix is not the same as a LA diner in many ways. And so like you can expect all the avant stuff happening in certain markets because it just won't sell, right?
Yes, and I think it's maybe the opposite. Like,
I love it.
You're right and you're wrong.
No. I love it. I mean, pushback, please.
I think
it's great.
You're right in the sense that when I travel around and I'm eating at different restaurants around the country, I can't bring my New York hat and evaluate it in New York terms. And I'm not talking about quality, and I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about the dining experience. It's not on the list, but I recently went to Emeril's in New Orleans, and it was so showy.
Was there like 3 TVs when you entered of him
No. Emeril's, which is run by his son EJ now, is proper fine dining.
Oh, cool.
Like serious proper fine dining, white tablecloths. I think they had gloves on. It's just very formal. You go back, you meet EJ, you meet Emeril was there very sweetly when we were there. There's a lot of, well, the chef is doing this tonight. Like in New York, that's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to know don't talk to me about the chef. You know, like
right.
Don't be formal. Don't talk to me about the chef. I want really fancy, really well-made food in a casual, that's just where we are right now. And that's different in New Orleans. And for instance, also different in Atlanta, for instance, and in other places. And so it's like, I can't go there and be snobby and crummy about it because it's like, oh man, it's so showy. It's like, yeah, this is what's happening here.
Yeah.
I think being someone who travels around so much, I'm also, I don't want to say surprised because I've been doing it long enough that I'm not surprised, but I'm consistently impressed with the level of dining and sophistication in smaller cities or cities that aren't New York. And even though we have a lot of great restaurants in New York, I actually think it's easier to get more exciting food in other places for a host of reasons, which I feel like we've talked about on podcasts prior. Just the level of pressure in New York to have butts in seats consistently, the food cost, the labor cost, the real estate cost, tends to make restaurants either be very well capitalized or a little bit conservative.
Yeah, I mean the turn is everything in New York, right?
Yeah.
And like the rush service is a real thing in New York. You have to, and also just like the waiting because that service isn't hitting the number and the overbooking and all the complaints we make about waiting for restaurants in New York.
Right. But I almost mean even more fundamentally than that, like the choice of what kind of cuisine will fly. Like let's open, like Vinay in Minneapolis is one of my favorite restaurants, and it's run by a Hmong chef, Ye Vong.
Can't wait to visit.
Oh, it's amazing. It's like truly a sort of like life-affirming experience. And there's other restaurants that I think in Minneapolis that didn't make the list for whatever reason, but were like I had some of the best food in a 48-hour period in Minneapolis. One of the reasons why is because it's not so painfully expensive to open a restaurant. Like you have Minneapolis, you have a developed market of diners with some level of like affluence or the ability to go out.
Big corporations there. There's people who come from all over the world to live in Minneapolis for a variety of reasons. It's a great city.
You have access to great produce. Yeah. And that allows you to have this like amazingly vibrant restaurant scene.
Tell me about Demo. Demo's on the list, and I know you made that visit, and I'm hearing great things about Demo all year. And there's a lot of great restaurants in New York. We're in a great period right now, but
we kind of are in a great period.
It's easy to like do the year end and say New York had a down year and LA had an up year, but like listen, New York is really, really good right now, and we have had many chefs on. But what is special about Demo?
Well, Demo to me is an example of one of those small restaurants that is just a human scale restaurant. I think that's the thing that I've been thinking so much about. Like, we have these great big battleships, which are great. Yep. But what I really love are these. They're not passion projects in the sense that like they're just for fun. Like they're serious restaurants and they're businesses. It's run by the chef Q Win, who I used to eat his food at. There's a restaurant in Greenpoint called Cool World.
Oh wow!
Do you remember that?
It was a blip on the map.
It was a blip, but man, they had the best steak au poivre with a aerated au poivre sauce.
Yes.
And crystal spiced fries. And I loved it. I went probably more than anyone else.
I feel like that restaurant was run by like folks who are maybe new to the restaurant game. There was like some challenges there for being new to restaurants. It was
also that space is a little bit cursed.
It is a little cursed, yeah.
Anyway, so Demo is off Father Demo Square. I think it might be Demo, but Demo. It's small, long, narrow, kind of like a wine bar. It has a great wine program, but it's just Q and Dina Fan, I think is his chef de cuisine. And they turn out remarkably delicious neo-bistro fare, you know? And it's a kind of small place that you go on a cold night and you get a glass of wine, you get the lobster au poivre, or you get the crispy rice. And it is just like it's a perfect way to spend an evening.
Zooming out, and this doesn't have to be for your Esquire work specifically, but given your travels, give us a city that really, really impressed you this year that maybe we don't talk about enough.
I don't think we talk about Minneapolis enough. To me, that has like the best confluence of factors that give rise to a fertile restaurant scene. I love Cincinnati. Cincinnati's on the list.
Yeah, I'm impressed by that choice. You know, I think Cleveland's got a great scene, and certainly Pittsburgh has been given lots of press, but Cincinnati does not get its love. And did you hang out with Keith Pandolfi?
Not this time. I think last time I did.
He's a longtime New Yorker, but moved out to Cincinnati years ago. Now he runs the local paper food section. Great journalist. Yeah.
I think Cincinnati has like a smaller scene, and like the way geographically it's set up is a little bit, I think, trickier for restaurants because from my understanding, like the downtown's not like quite as vibrant. And you have like Covington and these areas around it. Wildweed, which we included, was like one of my favorite meals.
Oh, cool.
Like I just was blown away by, it's a guy who used to be a catbird seat, and his wife is from Cincinnati. And it's so exciting. You know, it's so exciting and it's not that expensive. Everyone is jazzed to be there. People who work there are jazzed to work there. People who are eating there are jazzed to eat there. And you can feel that spirit.
Yeah.
And then the other perennial place, which I love going back to, is Houston. Like, I've been back. This is my third year going back. And it's almost like just now am I really grasping, this is how the city works. So, yeah, Houston, Cincinnati, and Minneapolis, forever.
Those are great cities. I love that you mentioned Houston. I got to go to Tetemo last September, and that's been written about quite a bit. But
well, I think, not to toot our own horns, I think I was the first one to write about Tetemo on a national scale, and that came about because I was eating somewhere else in Houston, and someone was telling me about this Masa Samurai. You know, like
good word.
And this was his passion. This was his mission. So I went to this strip mall with the mirrored windows, and it was not crowded. It's small, and it was also not crowded.
Next to a church?
Yeah.
Like literally in the strip mall next to it is a church.
And it blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like those little things, man. That's what I love about this job. I love the big restaurants. I love 425. I love the Le Veau d'Or is not big, but it has like a pedigree, right? But I love that people, chefs, restaurateurs are showing up as their authentic selves and communicating their love of food to diners. And that's something that we can pick up on. This is like a privilege to be able to do. Not to say I don't want to be compensated and be able to pay my bills, like all that stuff. But in terms of a job, to be able to have a platform to celebrate chefs and restaurants, it's such a pleasure.
Tell me about your Restaurant of the Year, Four Kings, in the Bay Area. Many of my friends in San Francisco have raved about it, chefs in particular, and really, I can't wait to visit. But this is your Restaurant of the Year. How did you all come to this conclusion?
Well, this is what I don't always get to overlap and sort of like ratify or whatever other restaurants. But I was in San Francisco and I ate at Four Kings with Omar. I think the thing about Four Kings is not only is it cooking on point, like the squab, which is mentioned in the piece, is like, if you don't mind looking in the face of the thing that you're eating, it's like a delicious experience. And I don't mind that. But it kind of embodies the story of Chinatown, San Francisco Chinatown in particular, which has been and continues to be threatened by forces of gentrification, being revitalized. And it embodies the story of the energy still being there. So I think, it's a good example of a restaurant where this is a good example, I think, of looking at the mix, like on the Esquire soundboard.
Yeah.
It's like story, like the story's there, the narrative's there. It's not just about the restaurant. It's about the restaurant in its place and culture. Okay, let's talk about the restaurant itself. Like strong vibe, really fun. Line out the door. Let's talk about the cuisine, the cooking is like top-notch Cantonese cuisine. So I think you have all of those things together and it's almost like unassailable. Of course, it's, the best new restaurant.
Are you doing this next year?
I would like to, yeah.
When do you start reporting? Because, we've had Raphael Brion from Food and Wine, Kate Casson from Bon App, and it seems like for those publications, it's like a constant job.
It's constant.
It's a job. It's really big, and to make sure you do it right, you have to get on planes and go to these places and visit. Are you planning to do that?
Yeah, I think for us, already, this list closed to go to print a couple of months ago, and I am obviously keeping track of where I've been eating, and I eat constantly out. As it gets closer, I would say I start traveling more and more. Right now, it's nice to be at home for a little while. Yeah. As you know, I'm working on a bunch of other projects too. But yeah, I'll start traveling probably February, March.
Is there a city that is on your radar that you want to go to?
I tend not to think so much in terms of cities as I do in regions.
Okay.
But it's kind of like everything needs to come together. Mm-hmm. Certainly I think like St. Louis is interesting to me. Places like Topeka, Kansas, Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. Speaking of other cities that I love Phoenix. Yeah. I think Phoenix has like an amazing food scene which no one talks about.
Yeah.
I find it also really meaningful to go back to the cities over and over again. Because you start to develop a real understanding of those cities. So I hope to visit a lot of the ones that I went to last year.
Yeah, Phoenix is cool, and I was able to go to Mesa and go to some incredible restaurants there, and it's a huge city, and
it's actually like
it's great. It's multiple
cities, yeah, like Scottsdale, Phoenix, Mesa.
What's wild? There's no full-time restaurant critic in that region.
I know.
Isn't that crazy? It's
Maybe
amazing.
I should move.
Yeah, if there's a publication that's willing to support it, I just think that they don't have the support, which is like shocking for a city with so much tourism for a variety of reasons and a great scene.
Well, sidebar, but I think it's because Phoenix has like lifestyle magazines.
Yeah.
But their local press, like local press everywhere, the news is hard hit.
Yeah. Let's talk about your other projects because I always love to hear what you're working on. But first, the Tom Colicchio book, and we've had Tom in and we talked about it. What a tremendous book. I really enjoyed reading it. As I told Tom, I read it in a day. I just love the stories. What was that like?
What was Tom's response? Huh. Good.
Huh. He's like, you need to take a couple laps to warm up with him, but I thought it was a great episode and once you get him going. But I respect what you're saying because I know in the collaboration process, words flow at different rates.
Yeah.
But in general, I thought it was terrific work.
Thank you.
What did you take away from that project?
What I found working with Tom is it was by far the most difficult project in terms of getting him to trust me. And to the extent that he did, I think that really shows up in the book. But every other collaborator that I've worked with, it's kind of like, okay, tell me your feelings, whatever, and they will talk about their feelings. Tom does not talk about his feelings, and it was a real challenge, although I think we got there at the end. There's a difference between telling me a story, right? And these are your stories. These are the stories you've told before, and you're retelling the story. That's not always the most impactful memoir. what you want are stories that are truly revealing of who you are, and you need to be able to reveal that. And if you're going to be working with a co-writer, you need to trust the co-writer enough to take care of those stories. In all honesty, I think that was a learning process for me, because in the absence of getting some of those stories, I really put myself into the pathos of it, because I had nothing else to write. And it's like, okay, let's talk about daddy issues, because I have daddy issues, you know?
Yeah.
And then ultimately through the work, he made it clear that was not accurate and not truthful for him. And so we had to go back, and I had to say, like, okay, if that's not it, fine. What is it for you? And I think ultimately what it was for Tom, and is for Tom, is he's just really good at cooking. He's been chronically underestimated because of his ADHD and from his educational background and his class background. All of a sudden, cooking put him in this world of very wealthy, very sophisticated people. And his life has been about negotiating that while staying true to himself and his roots.
Love that you say that. It really shines through in the book. And I think going back to his history in New Jersey, you really tap into some great stories about the class background, about his very humble upbringing and his relationship with his mother and having a household that's divided. But then, entering New York and just having that incredible, like the giraffe moments, just this like incredible exposure to like the top of the top.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I think, came of age and started working in like a magical period of restaurants where it was still sort of small enough that you could hit all the major guys. Unfortunately, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a fair number of women chefs, which he mentions in the book, but it was still not so fragmented, and yet he could have the freedom to go off and do his own thing, not only at Gramercy, which Gramercy is cooking, not maximalist, but like there's a lot of stuff going on. It's real market-based. And then at Kraft, he really is like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And he came up with that idea. And I think Kraft is like wildly successful, in part because of his, I don't care, I'm just going to do it, like mentality.
Yeah. He goes on instinct and gut, obviously. And you talk about his abilities. I mean, the guy is like clearly the sickest line chef.
That was a little bit of the challenge writing the book, is like, if I wanted to talk about food cost and like what it's like on the line, we could go for hours. If I asked him something more emotional, it was harder.
Like Rackle, like his time with Thomas Keller. Like, I'm sure maybe that was a tough.
No, more like, okay, well, when your dad kicked you out of your house, did you feel a certain way about it? Like, were you sad, or when? No, it's okay. No, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, was it though? Because I can only imagine, like, like that's what I mean by I was looking for all of this pathos and he wasn't there. The reason why it took so long, it took a long time to do that book, but one of the reasons it took so long is that you can only get ahead of the authors so far. You can help lead them, but you can't get so far ahead in terms of emotional vulnerability that they feel alienated from the text.
Yeah. I'm glad we got behind the scenes. It is such a terrific book. Pick it up. I have to ask you about Kwame.
Yeah.
Are you working on anything with him? Because your two books with Kwame have been amazing, and they've certainly been published in concert with his incredible rise. I loved the Chef Stable episode, which you feature in, and also Tatiana, of course, is what it is. It's New York's finest restaurant by many accounts. I've not been, but I think
you should go.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's in
Dogon, which is one of the best new restaurants in Esquire's list. We are working on our third book.
Cool.
With Tom Pold, who's in this building.
Yeah.
And it's much more personal to Kwame. It's a cookbook. And, Notes from a Young Black Chef was more of a memoir, although there were recipes. My America was food of the African diaspora, kind of tracing Kwame's own family life. And this latest book is very much like a love letter to New York and his childhood and what he actually makes. Like being a chef, it's not like you have hours to make chef-like food at home.
And particularly what he's doing at Tatiana, which is not, stuff you're going to do.
Not easy.
Not easy. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Has the book been optioned, the first book? I feel like, it needs...
The first book has been optioned. Notes from a Young Black Chef has been optioned.
Yeah.
For a while, like Keith Stanfield was attached,
cool.
but I don't know what's going on with that now. Yeah.
Would love to see that.
Me too.
Come to fruition. What else are you working on? I have to ask.
Just finished the Russ and Daughters cookbook.
Amazing.
Which is coming out next year, which I'm very excited
Can't
about.
wait to have you back to talk about that and the team there. I love that place.
David Nayfeld is a chef from Kefico. We have a book coming out called Dad, What's for Dinner?
Cool.
Greg Backstrom from Olmsted and Patty Ann's and 5 Acres. We just finished, or we're shooting his book called Nothing Matters But Delicious, a radically honest cookbook.
Yeah. I've seen it announced. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
Both that one and David Nayfeld's book. I am just not into idealized, and Kwame's book, to be honest. I'm not into idealized cookbooks anymore. It's like, look, sometimes shit happens and it's not perfect, and that's fine. Like, you don't need all of these ingredients. In fact, that is something that Tom, despite how difficult that process was, he really really got the point across that recipes are a little bit bullshit.
Yeah.
Like
that's his mantra for sure.
And that book has really good recipes, but they were not easy to get out of him because you'd be like, okay, well, do you use like 3 garlic cloves or 4? It's like, well, how much garlic do you want? Like just do what you...
Wait, so you were doing the memoir and the recipe work as well in that book?
Yeah, well, he has a wonderful chief of staff named Maya Land who was helping with the recipes. She was like integral. But yeah, I was doing that's traditionally how I do it.
Yeah.
And I think, in Tom's case, he would just get annoyed. He'd be like, well, do you want half a red pepper? Or do you want a full bell pepper? It's up to you. Just make sure the skin's crispy.
This tracks so well with our conversation.
But so now when I'm writing cookbooks, I'm trying to be more honest about that. That's like it. That's why I love Greg's book so much. Like, nothing matters. It just doesn't matter. Like, dry age, leave it in your fridge. Don't leave it in your fridge. Cut it this way. Don't who cares? It doesn't really matter. And I feel like our industry, there's a pressure for us to make things really precise and long, because then it's like, look how much expertise we have.
Yeah.
And you don't actually need that much expertise.
I mean, that's the instinct for sure with cookbook editing and publishing. I also think that it's why the front matter really matters.
Yeah.
And why setting up Greg's book. Because obviously there's going to be tenets that he follows when cooking. I mean, there are some rules and some instincts that you have to capture in the manuscript, right?
Yeah, 100%. Greg is probably one of the best trained chefs I've ever worked with. And it's not that technique doesn't matter. It's that just don't get caught up in the minutia. And if you mess something up, don't give up. Just zhuzh it. Find a way around it.
It's fixing mistakes, or not even mistakes, but like deficiencies.
And in fact, right now, or yesterday, Murray Hall, who's an amazing photographer, is shooting that book, and I went to look at the shots, and they're all perfect. And I kind of was like, you know what? Just mess it up. Sometimes your cod falls apart. In order to produce a book that really shows what life is like for the majority of people, you have to get past all of these in-baked biases in a way, like the editor who wants it to be totally buttoned up, the photographer, the food stylist, the prop stylist who wants it all to look perfect, because that's how we're sort of acculturated to present food. And what I want to do with my cookbooks and the cookbooks I work on is have it be much less aspirational and have it be like, oh yeah, look, it's still pretty, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
What's perfect?
It's a fine line. It needs to be a document that is a piece of art in some ways. I mean, visually speaking, I think at least here at Crown, we try to publish books that are beautiful in every respect. But real.
Beautiful in every respect does not mean perfect.
And that's to my point.
Yeah.
I mean, my book, Korea World, we shot it on location, and certainly there's some aggressive photos in there. And I think that's the way I like to do books. I'm a big fan of the documentary and not the studio. But
just to bring it back to the Esquire's B&R, I mean, I think to me that is what I'm always trying to celebrate is the human. Like in every work that I do, whether it's children's books, whether it's co-author and cookbooks, whether it's articles I'm writing or reviews or this list, is human beings and vulnerability and frailty, they need champions because we don't live in a culture where that is supported. So I want to take anything I can do, any platform I have, to celebrate people showing up as their authentic and full selves.
It's beautiful work you'd make. You really, when following that through, it really shows in your work. Let's close and talk a little bit about Zhang, because it's definitely, we've been talking about it on previous episodes, but I just have to say that it's terrific. And I share a love of Korean food, and I know you do as well. And the work you do with Mingu and Nadia, what do you take out of the release of that book?
That's been the most gratifying project for me to work on, at least in terms of adult cookbooks, because as we travel around the country, it's so clear that it resonates with so many readers, mostly Korean Americans, some Koreans, who have never seen their hanshik, Korean cuisine, and this one specific ingredient, jang, or it's a trio, gochujang, doenjang, and kanjang, haven't seen it be given the respect that it's due. And then to have that be in a book, a beautiful book, is really gratifying and validating. And I think I'm the co-author, right? It's like it's Mingu's expertise, but he doesn't speak English, so I was a words guy, with his knowledge. And I think as a white guy, I think they funnily also really like that, okay, here's someone who took so much time, and I spent years studying Chong, and I really care about it. And I know, like Nadia jokes that I'm probably like, I know the most about Chong in the States.
For sure. Yeah.
Which is maybe true, which is like a funny, if that's true, that's funny to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, English speaker at least.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It makes me feel really proud, to be honest, that I could have a part in that project.
It's a great book. You should pick it up, and it really dovetails with this rise in Korean American cuisine, which the year has been incredible.
It dovetails to me with that idea of being human and doing projects that celebrate humanity, like the Zhang producers. And the artisanal Zhang producers that we highlight, they're not big corporations. They're like people off on their own shit, like
they're
working
farmers.
really hard. Yeah. Farmers.
I mean, I'm using a broad term, but like to make an analogy, they're working in rural communities and
and they're not doing it. Not that there's anything wrong with profit, but they're not like doing it as this like big business. They're doing it for the love of Chong, for the love of culture, for their culture, for the history, and anything that I can do to celebrate that is like I said, it's a privilege to be able to do.
I'll leave it there. Joshua David Stein, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you, Matt.
This Is Taste is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things happening.